Good evening and welcome to the Power of Now. I'm Coach Mitchell.
And I'm Coach Darren.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight as we discuss connecting the dots and how each one of our thoughts lead to our behaviors, our actions, and ultimately our habits. So we want to talk about how those things are intricately linked and really create a narrative or create the narrative for our lives.
Yes, absolutely. For those who may have read the description, I included an old African proverb which says, "Don't look where you fell, look where you slipped." And all too often, we tend to look at the end result, the situation we find ourselves in, and we try to diagnose it from there.
Mm-hmm.
But we want to look at all other things that led up to it, because that's where we're going to really get down to the actual cause of what occurred. It's like when they talk about like disease. So disease doesn't just happen.
Right.
There's a series of things that occur over a period of time. And I just like to say that, to narrow it down to, it's, often the choices we make.
It's the choices. That's how we
Okay.
connect. We can connect the dots
Yes.
to really determine how we ended up in a place.
Yes.
But most importantly, how we can address those steps that we took leading up to where we are, if it has been a failure, even if it's a success, because you can add to, right? To elevate to the next step. But we can trace back, connect the dots based on our behaviors that and our choices that led up to, like you just mentioned, a health condition.
Yes.
We don't just develop, and we're not talking about being born with a condition, but let's talk about something like high cholesterol.
Yes.
Or obesity.
Or
diabetes, any chronic illness. Yes. Most of the times you can attribute it to lifestyle.
Yes.
So, any habits that we form, we can attribute it to first our thoughts. We've thought about it, we've been exposed to it, contemplated it, and then our behaviors and our actions towards developing those habits.
Yes. And I would like challenge you, just kind of maybe do an exercise. Like, for instance, exercise would be where I am now and my relationship with Coach Mitchell. I can go as far back as meeting someone on an elevator, and she had a book in her hand, a technology book, and I was in kind of a funky mood, but some said, just speak. You know what? Don't let your mood stop you. But by speaking to this person, it basically led to a conversation, and she invited me to do some volunteer teaching. That volunteer teaching, I ended up meeting one of the parents of the students in the program, was at the college, worked at the college. After the program was over, she called me up. She was looking for an instructor. One thing led to another. I was like, no, I really don't want to do it, But then something inside of me said, just tell her yes, because she was really desperate, I should say the college was desperate for an instructor. For again, a program. It was at risk teenagers at the college. I ended up doing that, teaching at the program, and then that brought me over to teaching actually at the college itself. And I ended up staying there, and as a result of teaching college itself, I ultimately met you as a student. And then we ended up working together, so forth and so on. And here I am, all because I made that one decision of speaking to that person that led to a conversation and an invite to, do some teaching.
Right. And it just goes to show the how we are connected in a way that is relational, but based on a need. Because as your student, I needed to learn a new skill set for a career change that I had at the time. But I noticed Coach Darren likes, he likes to let people know that I was once his student.
Anyway, but as far as connecting the dots,
yes,
I can see just that one little thing. And sometimes that, that's all it takes is one small decision
Mm-hmm.
that can lead to a series of events in your life. And like I said, so they could be good or bad. Uh, but when you learn to connect the dots, I like to think that when you learn to connect the dots, it helps you take ownership of where you may find yourself,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
you're going to play a part somewhere in those series of choices. And again, you could have made the choices with the best of intentions. So I'd say making the choices with the awareness
Mm-hmm.
without the judgment. You're really just trying to observe what are the things that I do that contributed to where I am at the moment.
Right. And I think we should all do that. Take
Mhm.
stock of, an introspective view of where we are. I
Yes.
think that should be something that we do consistently,
Hmm.
because growth can't happen if you're not constantly aware of your actions, your behavior, your interactions as far as relationships are concerned. You can't grow if you don't
Absolutely.
take stock
Yes.
of, where you've been
Hmm.
versus where you want to go.
Hmm.
So growth doesn't happen in stagnation.
Yeah, because what you're really doing, you're kind of replaying, uh, you know, different, journeys in your life, like all say the small journeys, but all those small journeys add up to the big journey. All
Mm-hmm.
those small dots add up to actually painting the portrait of your life when you start to connect them, and it will help you to, improve, mhm, possibly repeat.
Mm-hmm.
So if you did something really good, something worked out to your advantage, what they say, a lot of times when we're victorious, we spend so much time
In the
rejoicing,
victory.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
that we don't think about how did I get here, uh, and who are the people who played a part,
Oh yeah.
uh, because that's something that we may tend to forget, are the people who may have played the role, especially if the journey's been long.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of just playing it back in your head, and you go back like, you know what? It was this person who did or said something uh, way back here that really was pivotal.
That
In,
planted the seed.
yes, to me being here.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I share again about connecting the dots about and instruction. Has to do also with sort of teaching, but an instructor. I was, in a program. This
Mm-hmm.
goes back to high school. I was in a program at Seton Hall University, during high school, and there was an instructor who knew I wanted to go to the Naval Academy, and a guy who had just graduated, along with the Navy enlisted, happened to be on Seton Hall's campus,
Mm-hmm.
and this instructor just ran all the way across campus to pull me out of class. Even now, I'm just so grateful to say, I remember you said, this is the one thing about the people in your life, but him just, pulling me out of class to introduce me to the gentleman who was on campus. This gentleman became very, uh, pivotal in walking me through the process. Because honestly, I would have not had any idea of all the things I needed to do.
So he was more like a mentor
Yes.
in a sense, a
Yep.
quasi mentor.
Yep. And again, it's strange how things work out, because this gentleman, we became friends. You know, he ironically ended up working with my older brother after, gentleman got out the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
He developed a relationship with my brother. But all of this really occurred with that instructor coming to get me, to introduce me. Now, we could go back to connecting the dots before that, because at some point in time, I said to him that this is what I wanted to do.
The manifestation.
Yes. So, which is another part about, speaking what you want to certain people who have your best interests.
Exactly. Exactly. Because even I think that sometimes we don't realize that our thoughts have power.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Our thoughts have power. And it's funny that you mentioned that about the Naval Academy, because, I have, for as long as I can remember, always wanted to be in healthcare in one way, form, or fashion. But I remember, I can't remember why I was in this particular setting, but in a hospital. And I always said that I wanted to be a hospital administrator that made decisions. And I can't remember if it had something to do with my maternal grandfather who was ill when I was very young, and seeing him sick and how, people took care of him, that, the first responders and the healthcare workers took care of him. Or I don't remember, but I knew that's what I wanted to do. And here I am today making, impact in the healthcare industry that manifests itself in ways that impact people that they don't even know that I play a part in orchestrating better health outcomes, right? So manifestation, your thoughts, what you think, and this goes back to when I was a child. So nothing derailed that goal, that
Right.
dream, because I think, God made it possible for me to be in the space that I'm in today. So, I think it's important to remember that your thoughts are powerful, and it plays back into my morning prayer this morning. Our associate pastor, but her message was dream bigger. Right? Dream bigger. It was part of her message. I won't say her message because that was part of it, but dream bigger. But it just goes to show that if you're constantly hearing the same thing reverberated in your environment, and the narratives and the conversations have some of the same themes, then it's something you need to absorb and pay attention to. Pay attention to.
I'm glad that you mentioned you brought manifestation into this conversation, because all this plays a part. And I think once you align yourself, or you become in tune with, like you say, the messages that are being sent to you, you begin to, again, you can see the dots clearer, because when you're really in tune, first of all, you realize that nothing happens in isolation.
Right.
So every experience that we have, good or bad, is all part of bringing us closer to what, we'll say our purpose, our desire. And I think we move there quicker when we know and we can see what's happening.
Right.
And I think that it's really important when we can open, and it just made me think of something I just heard this week, where it was more or less a student asked, how long am I going to be in the dark? And the mentor's response was, until you're able to see in the dark. And I share that because I think once we begin to see how things are unfolding, it plays a huge part in, helping us find our way. So
Right.
even if we're going through, let's say, the dark, let's say the dark night of the soul, we're going through troubled times, we won't be able to find our way out until we open our eyes and see in the dark, which is seeing what's happening and seeing it from it's happening for us and not to us.
Absolutely. And I think that's important to call out, because when we are in a place of, I would say, unclear, and it's out of focus as to what our next step should be, that's why it's so important to sit and really have an introspective dialogue with yourself, or journal. I mean, I know that's part of some of the solution or recommendations that will culminate in our discussion tonight. But I think it's important that, like you said, we remember that, or not remember, but we are cognizant and conscious enough of what's happening in our environment to pause and not take on that victim mentality. Like what is happening? What parts have I played? What is it that I need to do? Is it someone I need to reach out to talk to help me navigate through this situation or this particular process?
And then just kind of following up on the manifestation, and you talk about thoughts. The other part of it too is our words, and it's been shared in religious doctrine, metaphysical doctrine, spiritual doctrine. That our thoughts and words have power. So you want to be mindful. And again, if you can connect the dots, you can go back and say, "Well, I remember saying X, Y, and Z, and look, look where I am."
Yeah.
And I said that could be good or bad.
I was going to say that plays both ways,
Yes.
right? That plays both ways.
Now, because it's been said, I said, universe doesn't have a sense of humor. It takes you literally. So if you're saying something, you're thinking something over and over, that has power, as I say, from a vibratory, from a vibration perspective, it has energy. So you want to be mindful of your thoughts and the things that you say. And if you can connect the dots between saying, "Oh God, I remember, saying this over and over," because it may not happen right away, but you might go, "Oh man, I didn't explain myself specifically to the universe. That's not what I meant.
That's not what I prayed for.
Right.
That's not what I prayed. That's not my intended.
Right.
That wasn't the intended."
Yep.
But I think we can look at that, even bring it back to, I think, something that's just routine, right? And we can bring it back to everyday experiences that everybody experiences in developing routines. I mean, some people can tell you their neighbor's entire schedule based on or developed routine. It's a habit. They get up in the morning, they come out, sit on the porch and have their coffee from 6 to 6:15. Then they check the mailbox for their newspaper. They sit on the deck and read the paper. I mean, you get what I'm saying?
Yes.
We develop those habits and those routines, or they're basically rituals. And we find ourselves, 5 years, 10 years down the road, and we've done the same thing the same way every day consistently. And that's where we find that level of stagnation, because we've not thought beyond that moment in time. And before you know it, that time has been spent, literally spent. It's been wasted. So I think connecting the dots and trying to determine how consciously we can get out of some of the mundane routines that keep us stagnant and prevent us from growing.
And part, like I said, when you're connecting the dots, it's like I said, you really want to be able to do it without any judgment. Because if you find yourself judging, I don't think you'll be honest with yourself. And part of this, again, the growth aspect or learning from what the dots tell you, it requires you to be honest and saying, yeah, I know I'm overweight. I'm overweight because, maybe X, Y, and Z, assuming that you're overweight due to overeating or eating the wrong foods. And that brings it into your consciousness. So maybe you begin to think when you reach for something that, is unhealthy or junk food, you may be less inclined because it's now in your consciousness. It's part of your awareness that doing this habit is leading to this result.
Right. When we are repetitive.
Yes.
We're repeating those same actions over and over again.
Yes. So I just find that connecting the dots also, to me, it shows the part that you played, maybe the part that other people played, and then the part that was just magical or miraculous. Like some may call it luck, some again, it may call it again God's intervention, may call it again the universe speaking to you, whatever it might be. But you know that there was this little piece that you really had nothing to do with. It was just other than being there. And maybe that's maybe it comes down to saying, well, you know what? I decided to stop in the store. Like something told me to stop in the store to get something on my way home, which I really wasn't planning on doing. But I stop in there and I meet someone who then that relationship ends up, being really pivotal in, say, your personal professional life.
Yeah, I call magic manifesting all God's intended covenants in my life, right? So I think you're right. It's making those connections and being able to identify them when they happen, or when you're sitting and you're meditating or reflecting, because you don't always have to meditate to reflect.
Right.
And really take stock of where you are and where you want to be, right? Because I think those things that got us to where we are in whatever particular period in time or space that we're in are things that we can go back and connect our actions, our interactions, our relationships, our lack of relationships, our communication or a lack of communication. It's always that risk reward that, that there's the scale. There's always going to be a compare and contrast.
Yes.
Right. So I think reflecting on where we've been is important.
Because, we've been talking about it in terms of, say, a large span of time, or that may be the impression that you're getting. We're talking about connecting the dots and on things that may have been pivotal in your life. But it's also, at the end of the day, they will say it's a good practice to kind of replay the day, as you, lie down or go, to go to sleep, or you're taking it down, is to replay the activities and the events of the day to allow you again to, think about the things that you did well, or things that you would do differently. And that also leads to your growth, and maybe, the next day you having a better day. Always comes back though to having that self-awareness where you can just, self-awareness and accountability, where you can be honest saying, you know what, I could have been a better person in that moment.
Right.
Or I really felt good about what I did in that moment. So again, it's about having those, being able to connect those dots, because there's always going to be dots, that are connected in your life. The whole universe is built on relationships. Everything is relational. One thing impacts another. I mean, I remember reading something years ago, and I think it might have been a book by Joseph Campbell. No, actually, that's not who it was. But I remember him saying, the author, really relating to just the absence of ants. If they were wiped out, the impact it would have, and they drew the connection all the way up to the shifting of the earth. And we don't think about it in terms of that, or it's probably known as the butterfly effect. So everything's connected. When we talk about, say, going through your day, you being nice to someone can change the trajectory of, I can't talk, their day, which could impact everybody that they come in contact with, good or bad. Your kindness, your smile could just change somebody's whole energy.
Absolutely. And it changes yours too.
Yes.
It changes yours too. And, if we're mindful in the moments, if we're mindful of our behaviors and our actions, then we can identify when we've made that connection.
Yes.
When we've made that connection. And I think that's important, because that will help in the times where we are critical of ourselves,
Mhm.
and we won't stay in that space
Right.
because we can identify it and address it
Mhm.
all in the moment.
Again, your point right there, I think, is really, really important, because if we are serious, right, if we are serious about making a positive difference, because everybody talks about wanting the world to become better, uh, but you know what? If you challenge them on them becoming better, then, well, it's not me. I mean, if you just read, if you're on social media, you read the comments, it's always somebody else is the problem, never me. But if you're really serious about making a positive difference, and then you do look at your behavior and you can see, wow, all I did was look that person in the eye and spoke to them and said hello. Especially when you catch somebody off guard, and then they look at you first in that moment of shock that they were actually acknowledged,
Right.
and then they smile, and you almost see the energy between the two of you just change.
Which is so baffling to me that people have normalized negative behaviors
Yes.
and normalized not being, I guess, cordial is the word.
Pleasant, nice.
Pleasant, nice. Being human doesn't mean that you walk around angry and antagonizing every day, all day.
Yeah, you're correct.
I can't imagine being pent up all the time, and my normal behavior is cheerful behavior. My normal interaction is to smile at my neighbor, at my fellow human being, So characteristics that are contrary to who I am, they baffle me in that regard. So I think, behaviors are important when we're drawing connections to how we interact and build relationships with others.
Yeah, most of you probably be familiar with Steve Jobs' commencement speech at, I believe it was Stanford. This was not so long, I think, before he passed away. But he talked about connecting the dots. And he said, something to the effect that you can only connect the dots when they're behind you. And I know it's going to seem a little risky here, me challenging Steve Jobs. But
But a man, yet but a man.
I don't think the dots have to be behind you. They could be right there with you. When you decide, what do I want my next dot to be? Therefore, I will connect it. Therefore, I won't let the dot appear and then connect the two. I'm going to lay the dots out and then connect. So what you're really doing is you're actualizing the vision that you want by saying, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to speak to that person. I'm going to smile at that person. I'm going to be this way in the meeting. What I'm doing is I am now
projecting.
Yes, I'm putting the dot out there, which I will then connect to. That's my next dot. That's my next step. And then you just keep doing that, now sometimes some of the dots won't go where you want them to go, but you'll still become that thing, still become that person that you're
Right.
envisioning.
That's mindfulness, as well as being consciously aware of how you want to navigate,
Yes.
how you want to move, how you want to live, how you want to interact. So I think, two things can be true at the same time, right?
Absolutely.
So Steve Jobs can be right and Darren Wright it can be right.
Yep.
Right. So I think looking at it from that perspective is key in wanting to manifest more positive outcomes in your life, more positive relationships, and building more positive relationships. And I think in building a culture of moving forward and growth. So
Because you're taking that approach, you mentioned something a little while ago that we've normalized bad behavior. And which is really sad is seeing behavior from adults. Again, if you spend any time on any social media platform, you will see adults name calling it's like these people, it's like these triggers. And I'm going, wow, do they have any awareness about their behavior? Like what brings you, again, let's connect to that. What brings you to the point that that's your immediate response because somebody doesn't know something, that all of a sudden you became the most intelligent person in the world, and now you're condescending.
Right, and attacking.
Right. So when you really get to the point where you really want to make a difference, then you make a difference with every dot that you are a part of. So again, in that corporate meeting, in the person that you pass, if you're a teacher, a student, whatever, wherever you are is your opportunity to create a dot that you can then connect, as part of your, picture, for lack of a better word, that's something hopefully you could be proud of. And if you're proud of, being destructive, vicious, vindictive, okay, then we got to go deep with your dots. You got to go deep because there's something.
There's a disconnect.
Yes,
there's definitely a disconnect, and I think in this environment that we're in, adapting a culture of consciousness, adapting a culture, and I'm not talking just organizations, I'm talking about the organ, the body, you as an individual, adapting a culture of understanding where we're able to listen, to understand what the other person is saying, being compassionate and having empathy towards our fellow men and women, but knowing that cultures are different, therefore people are different. So having that ability to be able to understand just by listening and not jumping to conclusions about a thing, about a person, about a place, about anything,
yes,
that we develop a higher level, I would say, a higher level of empathy and mindfulness as a whole.
There's a quote by a gentleman who has passed away. His name is Ram Das. And he said, when you learn to listen, everyone becomes a guru. And I want you to think about that, when you learn to listen, because everybody has something to share. They got a story to tell. And I think we can learn, pretty much from everybody. Now, the message may not hit you till years later, may not be something that this goes back to connecting the dots. In that moment, it may not be something for you. But if you connect that with one of my other philosophies is in nature, nothing goes to waste. In our life, all of our experiences are given to us to be utilized at some point. So somebody says something to you, you may not think much of it, but if you're listening and you don't just, blow them off, it'll stick with you. And at some point in time, that message is going to be meaningful to you.
Absolutely. It may not make sense in the moment, but sometimes in the meantime, like when you're experiencing challenges or you are at the pinnacle of the success that you want to be in that moment, that may be something that you can pick up from the past to say, this is something that's going to benefit me now. Now I understand why I was exposed to that or why they gave that to me, because it's going to help me in this moment.
Which is an aspect of connecting the dots. Being able to look at, small things, big things, and again, you begin to connect them and you begin to see your life vision, coming into play, whether it's an intentional vision or whether it's unintentional, but you can begin to see how your life is playing out. You'll begin to notice too the patterns, the themes that keep repeating themselves, you know what, you begin to see it. But it requires you, Coach Mitchell, you always talk about journaling. It requires you to either write it down or at least replay it. Take time to replay it in your mind.
Yeah, when I first started journaling, now that you bring that up, because that is one of the things that we can interject into, or I would say interject into the intervention of our negative narrative. When I first started journaling and I went back, because I always go back and read a month of journaling to see if I've hit a goal or if there has been a common thread that has happened over the course of 30 days. When I first started years and years ago, I realized I was very angry because everything I wrote was negative. Everything I wrote was in my journal was negative. And you hit upon it when you're immature and you're not mindful and you don't have a level of self-awareness, it's everybody else's fault.
Yes.
But what I realized in that journaling process and going back and reading through my journal, that there were some things about my behavior, my actions, and my character that I needed to work on. Because when I did that, I started to see the changes. Some were subtle, and I would look back and go, oh, wow, that changed. I changed in that area. Some were immediate, but having that level of reflection, that self-awareness to go back and reflect will help you identify where you need to work on you versus everyone else.
Yes.
Because once you work on yourself, you're going to see your relationships change. You're going to see how you interact. You're going to see how you apply yourself differently in all areas of your life. So I think journaling is self-awareness, mindfulness 101. I think get you a journal. We have a visitor. Just this little net. Just
I thought you meant we had somebody. Okay. So all the things that we shared so far, again, are, I think, very important in terms of our, again, our growth, because being able to, again, reflect, to really pay, give attention to all of the things that are occurring. We always, again, become the observer, of our life at first, to say, well, you know what? Well, that went really well. I felt really well. I was thinking really well, as opposed to, just we talk about, reacting versus responding, but when you have that awareness and you're totally engaged, like I said, you can then put the dots out there that you want to connect. And I just think it's really important once you decide, yeah, I want to become a better person, or I want, and when I say that, it doesn't mean that you are dysfunctional,
right.
Though they say pretty much we all have some level of dysfunction, but you just decide what area of my life can I, that needs my attention. And one way you can get there is looking at aspects of your life, and one common area is, people always talk about their health or their finances, maybe their career, relationships. And if you don't know, you're either you don't want to know, or you're lying to yourself, because there's going to be some area in your life, and if there's ever a point where it's all laid out, it was probably because you were intentional. Now, I I don't think it happens by luck that all the components of one's life is going, the way that they desire without them being intentional about it happening.
Right. I think most of us just wake up to the routine and allow life to happen instead of making life happen for us.
Yes.
And I think that's part of the intentionality that we have to incorporate in our lives in developing strategies in personal development. What do we want what does fulfillment feel like for us? What does growth look like, in the next year, in the next month, in the next year, in the next 5 years,
Yes.
in the next 10 years? What does that look like? And then when we determine what that looks like, how are we going to get there?
Yes.
That's where the goal setting comes in. That's where accountability partners come in.
Yep.
So I think, again, it's important. And it's important to have someone that's going to help you along the journey, because life gets hard. Life is hard. And sometimes the weight of life can be so unbearable that you won't move forward.
Right.
Because you just can't see your way around this particular weight that may be in your life, the challenge that may be upon you. So I think it's important to have an accountability partner, someone or a mentor, or, someone that you can definitely rely on, that's not going to tell you what you want to hear, but will help you get through the things that you need to hear.
Yes. And I think even dealing with the hard or the rough patches, when you develop that growth, that growth, again, the growth is continuous. You get to a point where you can even deal with the rough patches, I won't say almost with ease. You just learn to roll with the punches. And that comes from, an intentional development to withstand those storms.
Absolutely. And understanding that this too shall pass.
Yes.
You know how kids are. It's oh my God, if I don't, if this happened, it's the last day on earth for me, or I can't go forward, or if they don't get what they want, it's, oh my God, I can't make it beyond today. Right. Once you are in a mental space of self-awareness, that cognitive space, I won't say mental, but that cognitive space of self-awareness and mindfulness, like you said, you understand that even though there's some obstacles, there may be some barriers, it may be some difficult times, you're going to get through it. You don't have to, as you always say, know the how, but understand that this too shall pass.
Yep.
And it will all work out as long as you keep walking.
Yep. That's what yep.
Keep moving.
Yep.
Keep
Just
moving.
keep walking. You do what you can. And then sometimes you just have to stand still and just let it happen. Let things unfold. And that is also part of the growth, because we're just not taught that way. So we get, when things don't go our way, when challenges occur, we also become, and this is where I'm paying attention to the theme in your life. We get so focused on what is occurring that we don't connect the dots and say, when or where did I slip? And let me think, because our ego is going to tell us that we did everything right, that it wasn't our fault. But when you're honest and you're like, looking back and I'm laying out the dots, I can see where, as I say, I went left when I should have gone right, or I just did something that made the difference. Or, like I said, don't want to sound like it's always bad. So also say, you know what? If I'm glad I made the decision, or it's probably, here's something real important. I was glad that I listened to my intuition. Mhm. That voice inside of me, because that's usually what it is that will lead you to do something that you probably would not have done that made the difference. And if it wasn't intuition, and again, you just knew that this is what you needed to do, then again, you know what? Recognize that, give yourself, celebrate it, that you were able to make that decision that was pivotal.
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 Yeah.
You got me.
Yeah. Oh man.
Pivotal.
Yeah. Thank you.
So yeah.
Connect the dots. That's really it.
Yep. I'm glad you pointed that out, because not everything is bad, right? So when you've hit a milestone or you've worked hard to accomplish something and you accomplish it, take note of that, celebrate, and then figure out how do you add to that to get to the next level. Right?
Yep.
So I think that's so critical that we celebrate our wins, we celebrate our victories, but make sure that we are also being mindful of how we navigate through the challenges.
Yes.
Don't dwell in them, but being mindful of how we get through them.
So you want to have, like I said, the awareness without the judgment, and the accountability to take ownership in the part that you played in wherever you find yourself, good or bad. And it's just like we're quick to want to blame others, also be quick to want to give credit to others, because contrary to folklore, there's no such thing as a self-made person. It doesn't exist. If you hear somebody say, they're full of it, because unless you are controlling your entire supply chain in your life, you by yourself.
Yep. Can't do it alone.
Nope.
Cannot do it alone.
So, don't just point fingers when things go bad. You know what? Point fingers and say, you know what? This person contributed.
Absolutely. It may seem like you've done it by yourself because you've done most of the heavy lifting, but it's your life.
Yes.
We're in charge of our lives, right? So we're going to have to do the brunt of the work.
Yes.
Right. So, like Coach said, just as quick as we can discount and dismiss people, we need to make sure that we're giving people their just due.
Yes.
So, Coach?
I think that's it.
So connecting the dots.
Connect the dots.
Make sure that you see the full picture, or at least map it out so that you're able to draw a complete picture of where you want to be. Basically, create some goals, have a strategy, but walk it out, being mindful along the way. We want to thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Coach Mitchell.
And I'm Coach Darren.
Join us tomorrow night at 8 p.m. for Inside Outside on Wellness Wednesday, where we will be bringing you hopefully some great tips and strategies to implement on your health and wellness journey. So we hope you connect the dots. If you have any questions, as always, please feel free to reach out to us. Hit us up on our Facebook page.
The power of now.
The power of now. Remember, if you don't start now, there can be no next. Have a great night.